A boy walks straight through a brick wall in the middle of I.M.P City, and not one demon on the street even blinks. Because in hell, nobody's checking if the shadows have a heartbeat, but this one does. Halfway between alive and dead, halfway between two worlds that were never supposed to touch, Danny Phantom just fell into the one place in the universe already built out of nightmares. And hell has no idea what just walked in. This is Galaxy Lore Untold, and this is What If Danny Phantom Entered Helluva Boss. I.M.P is about to get a job they never asked for. Ozzy's family is about to meet something heaven never warned them about. And somewhere in the ring, a half-ghost kid, who spent his whole life protecting a town that never thanked him, is about to find out what it means to matter in a place with no rules at all. This story was written by me, and if you've got a what if you want to see next, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, hit that bell, and stay to the end, because hell is about to meet its first ghost.
Fuck the shit back! Get away! Now, sir, with all due respect.
The rift didn't open like a doorway, it opened like a wound. Danny had been mid-strike, fist crackling green, when Nocturne's claws raked sideways through the air instead of through him. And the tear that followed wasn't the shimmering blue seam of the ghost zone. It was black, edged in something that looked disturbingly like old blood, and it screamed on a frequency his ears weren't built to survive. He had half a second to register that the physics were wrong. Ghost zone rifts didn't have a pulse. Before the pull got him, and Nocturne's dream fog dissolved into static, and the world he knew came apart at the seams. He hit pavement. Not soft ectoplasm slick pavement either. Real concrete, cracked and stained, radiating a heat that had nothing to do with the sun, because there wasn't one. Danny lay there a second longer than he needed to, human legs reforming out of the ghost tail on reflex, hoodie snagging against grit. Overhead, the sky was the color of a healing bruise, streaked with drifting ash that never seemed to land. The air tasted like a struck match. His ghost sense went off before his eyes finished adjusting. A cold breath fogging out of his mouth, sharp and immediate. The kind of spike he usually got standing in front of something ancient and furious. He'd learned a long time ago not to ignore that feeling. He just didn't expect it to keep going. And going. Like the whole place was one long exhale of something dead. "Okay," he muttered, pushing up onto one elbow, scanning a skyline that made absolutely no sense. Buildings stacked at angles that shouldn't have held weight. Neon signs in a script that hurt to look at directly. A river of something viscous and green-black cutting between the streets below. Definitely not the ghost zone. He became aware, in that order, of three things. The smell, which was sulfur and static and something sweetly rotten underneath. The sound, a low, constant hum of traffic and shouting and machinery that never let up. And the eyes. A lot of eyes. From windows and alley mouths, none of them blinking away fast enough to be casual. Danny didn't transform back. Some instinct told him that wherever here was human was probably the more dangerous thing to be. 3 blocks over, in an office with a sign that flickered I.M.P in tired red neon, Luna had her boots up on the desk, and her phone 6 inches from her face, when the front window rattled without wind. She didn't look up right away. Things rattled in I.M.P City. Buildings settled, trucks backfired. Somebody's deal went bad 2 streets down and shook the foundations. But this had a rhythm to it. 3 short pulses, like something testing the glass from the outside without touching it. "Moxie," she said, flat. "Something's outside." Moxie was elbow deep in restocking the weapons cabinet, and he startled hard enough to nearly drop a crossbow bolt into his own boot. What kind of something? The kind making the window do that." Luna finally swiveled her chair, ears flat. Through the grimy glass, the street looked normal. Imps shuffling by, a stray dog demon rooting through a dumpster, the usual smear of neon and smoke. Nothing that should have made the glass hum like a struck bell. Millie appeared in the doorway from the back room, knife already loose in her grip out of habit rather than alarm. "You two seeing something I'm not?" "Nobody's seeing anything," Luna said. "That's the problem." Blitzo picked that exact moment to slam through the front door with an armful of poorly labeled ledgers, kick it shut behind him, and announce, "We got a job. Some Overlord's mistress wants her husband's replacement mistress. Gone." Which, look, I know, tale as old as time, but the pay is. He stopped. looked at the three of them staring at the window. What? Something's out there, Moxie said. Something's always out there, Mox, that's the hole. The window didn't shatter. It rippled, like something had brushed through the glass without breaking it. A shimmer of not quite visible cold cutting a line across the pane, and gone in an instant. All four of them froze. Okay, Blitzo said, voice pitched higher than usual. That's new. Danny had meant to keep moving. Find higher ground, get a read on the layout, figure out if this place had a north that meant anything. Old habits, the kind you built after enough interdimensional emergencies. But the neon sign 3 buildings down had snagged his attention with something almost like relief. An actual, recognizable Roman alphabet. I.M.P. Whatever that stood for, it was the first thing in 6 blocks that didn't look like it wanted to eat him. He went intangible out of habit rather than plan, drifting a testing pass through the wall to get the shape of the place before deciding whether to knock. Bad idea, in retrospect. He hadn't accounted for the fact that a room full of armed strangers in an unfamiliar dimension might notice a chill pass through their window glass. He caught the tail end of a raised voice. Something's always out there, Mox. And pulled back before fully committing to a decision he hadn't finished thinking through. Better to knock. Actually knock, like a person. He dropped back to full visibility around the corner. Human. Hands stuffed in his hoodie pocket like that would make him look less like he'd fallen out of the sky 40 minutes ago. And walked up to the door like it was any Tuesday. He knocked twice. Inside, 4 demons looked at each other with an expression Danny would come to recognize, eventually, as the specific dread of Imp City professionals who just watched something walk through a wall, and then, bafflingly, use the door. Blitzo cracked it an inch, one eye visible. We're closed. Danny started, and stopped, because up close the guy on the other side of the door had yellow eyes, ash-gray skin, and a tail, and every alarm bell in Danny's head that usually meant ghost was staying eerily, completely silent. Whatever this was, it wasn't ectoplasmic. It was something else. Something that felt, if anything, more permanent. Sorry, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Can you tell me where here is? Blitzo's eye narrowed. Behind him, Millie had drifted into a spot with a clear throwing lane, knife loose. Moxie's hand had found something under the counter. Luna hadn't moved from her chair, which was somehow more unsettling than if she had. Buddy, Blitzo said slowly, you're in Imp City. Hell. You know. Hell. The place people go when they're... He stopped, studied Danny's face, which was doing a poor job hiding actual, gut-level confusion. Rather than the calculated menace Blitzo usually expected from things that walk through walls. You didn't know that. No. Danny's stomach did something complicated. Hell. Actual hell. Not a ghost zone deep realm. Not one of Skulker's traps. Not Dan's future. An entirely different afterlife system that apparently existed parallel to everything he thought he understood about death. I was fighting someone. A ghost. There was a portal, and it wasn't supposed to look like that. And then I was just here. You died recently? Millie asked, not unkindly, knife still ready. No. I mean, kind of. It's complicated. I'm not dead. Dead. I'm half. 4 blank stares. Half ghost, Danny clarified, aware of exactly how insane that sounded out loud. In an office in hell, to demons who apparently ran some kind of murder-for-hire business, if the ledgers under Blitzo's arm were any indication. It's a whole thing. Lab accident. I have ghost powers, but I'm still alive. Mostly. Luna finally spoke, phone lowering an inch. That window thing. That was you? I went intangible to see if it was safe to knock. Sorry. That was rude, actually. Now that I say it out loud. Blitzo and Moxie exchanged a look that carried an entire silent conversation. The kind of look that meant, we've seen weirder, but we've also never seen this specific weird, and that matters. Okay, Blitzo said, opening the door another 6 inches, tone shifting into something performatively casual that didn't fool anyone in the room. New guy. Half dead. Fell through a bad portal fighting a ghost that isn't from here. Ended up in hell, instead of wherever half-dead teenagers usually end up. That about cover it? That's about it. Great, Blitzo said, smile a little too wide. Millie, don't stab him yet. Moxie, get the Actually, you know what, kid? Just come in, sit down. We're gonna need you to explain that a lot more before anybody decides what to do with you. Danny stepped inside, and the door shut behind him with a click that felt, in that moment, unreasonably final. He told them the shape of it, if not every piece. The accident, the portal, his parents, the town he protected, the enemies who wanted him gone for one reason or another. He left out specifics he wasn't sure he should hand a room full of armed strangers, and he noticed, with the part of his brain that had gotten good at reading rooms after 2 years of secret identity management, that they noticed him leaving things out. Nobody called him on it. Yet. Millie had relaxed, marginally, enough to sheath the knife but not enough to sit. Moxie had produced a battered laptop and was, disturbingly, taking notes. Luna had gone back to her phone but was very obviously still listening, and Blitzo leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, studying Danny with the specific calculation of a man doing math on how something could be either useful or catastrophic, and hadn't yet landed on which. So you can walk through walls, Blitzo said. Turn invisible, fly, and some other stuff. Danny didn't elaborate. He didn't love where this line of questioning was going. And you're not, sent here, by somebody, to do a job. Blitzo's eyes narrowed slightly. Nobody just falls. Into hell, kid. People get sent here. People get born into it. Things that fall into hell usually get sent by something with a reason. Nobody sent me. I told you. It was an accident. Uh-huh. Blitzo didn't sound convinced. Exactly. But he didn't sound like he was calling Danny a liar either. More like a man filing the information under pending. Watch closely. Here's the thing about accidents in hell, kid. We don't really believe in them. Not because we're paranoid. Okay, we are paranoid. But because things that seem like accidents tend to have somebody behind the curtain who benefits. Danny hesitated. It wasn't wrong, as concerns went. He'd learned enough about being hunted to recognize careful, controlled suspicion when he heard it. That's fair, actually. I don't know how to prove it wasn't. I don't even know where I am on a map, let alone why. Moxie looked up from the laptop. For what it's worth, sir, if he were something dangerous sent to infiltrate us specifically, I feel he'd have a better cover story than, oops, wrong afterlife. Or that's exactly what he'd want us to think, Millie said, not entirely joking. Guys, Luna's voice, flat and bored, cut through it. All three looked at her. She hadn't looked up from her phone. He's not lying. Ghost got that specific, I got yeeted somewhere I don't understand face. I've seen it before. On new hires. There was a beat of silence in which Blitzo visibly weighed his employee's judgment against his own professional paranoia, and, for now, let it tip toward not immediately a threat. Fine, he said, uncrossing his arms. Kid, what's your name? Danny. Danny. Okay, here's where we're at. You're not from here, you don't know the rules, and you're walking around with powers that made my window do something I've genuinely never seen a window do. That makes you interesting to exactly the kind of people you do not want to be interesting to. Overlords. The Ars Goetia if word travels that far up. Maybe even the feathery lightning brigade upstairs, if you're weird enough to register on Heaven's radar. He ticked them off like inventory, not exaggeration. So my advice, free of charge. Don't advertise the wall walking. Don't advertise any. Because right now you're an unknown, and unknowns either get left alone, recruited, or turned into a very interesting science experiment, and I promise you do not want option 3. Danny felt something cold settle in his chest that had nothing to do with his ghost half. And which one are you deciding? Blitzo's smile came back, sharp and unreadable. Haven't decided yet. Ask me again once I know if you're useful. Outside, the ash kept drifting down through a sky that never brightened, and somewhere much farther up the ring than a run-down office with a flickering sign, something with older eyes and older patience had already felt the wrongness ripple through hell's fabric like a struck bell, and had started, quietly, to listen for where it rang from. The thing about hell, Danny was learning fast, was that nothing about it operated on a schedule he understood. Back in Amity Park, danger came with a rhythm. Ghost portal opens, alarm goes off, you suit up. Here, danger seemed to just exist. Ambient, a permanent weather system rather than an event. He'd been at I.M.P's office 3 hours, sitting on a lumpy couch that smelled faintly of gun oil and old coffee, answering Moxie's increasingly specific questions about ectoplasmic biology, with answers that were maybe 60% true, when Blitzo's phone rang with a tone that made everyone in the room go still. "That's not the job line," Moxie said, voice tightening. "No," Blitzo agreed, already answering. "It's not." Danny watched him listen for exactly 4 seconds, watched the performative swagger drain out of his shoulders, and something colder slide in to replace it. Watched him say, "Yeah. Yeah, we've got him. No, he's not." A pause, listening, jaw tightening. Okay, we'll be there." He hung up, looked at Danny with an expression that had recalibrated entirely. "Who was that?" Millie asked. "Stolas." Blitzo said the name like it cost him something. "Word's already moving. Somebody upstream felt the..." He gestured vaguely at Danny. "The thing you did when you came through. The rift. Says half the ring felt a ripple like something tore a hole in the fabric that shouldn't tear. And now everybody who matters wants to know what walked out of it." Danny's stomach dropped. "Already? I've been here 3 hours. Welcome to hell, kid. News travels faster than light when the alternative is somebody else profiting off information you didn't sell first." Blitzo grabbed his coat off the hook by the door. "Stolas wants a look at you personally, and when a Goetia prince wants a look at something, you don't really get to say no. Not if you want to keep all your organs in their current arrangement. Is he dangerous?" "He's an owl-headed royal with more magical firepower than this entire city block, and a soft spot for Blitzo's ass," Luna said, not glancing up from her phone. "So, yes. And also it's complicated. Extremely complicated," Moxie added. Blitzo shot them both a look that promised a later conversation, and didn't deny any of it. The estate, when they arrived, via a process Danny still didn't fully understand, some kind of demonic transit that felt like being poured through a keyhole, took his breath away in a way nothing in Imp City's grime had managed. Marble the color of old blood, gold leaf catching candlelight, ceiling so high they vanished into shadow, a silence so total it felt like its own kind of pressure. Danny had seen ghost realm palaces that tried for grandeur and always ended up looking like theme parks. This felt real, old, load-bearing, in a way that went beyond architecture. Stolas received them in a long gallery lined with portraits of owls that Danny suspected were ancestors rather than decor. He was tall, taller than Danny expected, all sweeping dark feathers and sharp golden eyes that tracked Danny's every movement with the patient, cataloging attention of someone who'd spent centuries learning to read threats before they announced themselves. His voice, when he spoke, was warm in a way that didn't quite match the calculation underneath it. "So," Stolas said, circling once, slow, unhurried, "you're the ripple." "I guess so." Danny held his ground, chin up, refusing to let the sheer scale of the room or the demon in front of him shake his voice. He'd stood in front of ancient, furious ghosts plenty of times. This wasn't so different, just bigger stakes, unfamiliar rules, and a much nicer rug. "I didn't mean to cause a ripple. It was an accident." Stolas's eyes narrowed, thoughtful rather than hostile. "Do you know what you actually are, boy?" "Not the..." A dismissive flick of clawed fingers, half-ghost business Blitzo relayed to me over the phone in his charmingly imprecise way. "I mean structurally, ontologically. Do you understand what it means to exist between two states that were never meant to overlap?" "I've had 2 years to think about it," Danny said. "I don't have a textbook answer. I just know it's mine." Something flickered across Stolas's expression. Not quite approval, but adjacent to it. A refreshingly honest non-answer. "Most things that end up in my gallery either lie beautifully or grovel predictably. You're doing neither." He stopped circling, settled into an ornate chair with the unhurried authority of someone who owned the room and everything in it. "Here is what concerns me, little Riftwalker. Hell has a balance. Overlords, the ring, the exterminations that come down from heaven twice a year like clockwork. It is a machine that has run the same way for longer than your entire species has had a written language. And machines do not like foreign parts." "I'm not trying to be a foreign part. I just want to go home." "Of course you do." Stolas's tone was almost gentle. "And I would very much like to help you get there. Genuinely, I have no interest in a permanent half-ghost houseguest cluttering up an already complicated political landscape. But home requires understanding what tore, and things that tear reality do not close themselves quietly." Whatever ripped to let you through is still there, still torn. And torn things attract attention from parties far less hospitable than myself. Danny felt the cold settle deeper. Like who? Stolas's golden eyes flicked, just once, upward, toward a ceiling that Danny understood, with sudden clarity, was gesturing at something far above the literal architecture. Heaven felt it too, Stolas said quietly. Extermination isn't due for months, but tears in the fabric between realms are exactly the sort of anomaly that draws attention from the Exorcist forces regardless of schedule. If they decide you're a threat to the metaphysical order, and boy, you very much read as one, they will not send someone to talk. The conversation didn't stay just Stolas and Danny long. A door at the far end of the gallery opened, and a girl came through it with the particular controlled fury of someone used to being underestimated in rooms full of powerful men. Octavia, Danny would learn. Stolas's daughter. Dark hair, sharp eyes, an expression that suggested she'd overheard at least the tail end of the conversation, and had opinions. "You're the thing that broke the sky," she said. Not a question, arms crossed, studying Danny with open curiosity rather than fear. "I didn't break anything on purpose. Nobody ever does. But there was no real venom in it, more the flat, practiced cynicism of a teenager who'd learned early that adults' explanations rarely covered the whole truth." She looked him over once more, taking in the very human clothes, the very not demon face. "You don't look like much." "I get that a lot." That got something close to a smile out of her. "Quick, there and gone. Good. Means people underestimate you. That's useful down here." She glanced at her father, something unreadable passing between them. Then back to Danny. "For what it's worth, whatever they decide to do with you, don't let Dad's Overlord friends corner you alone. Half of them would love a new toy to study." "Octavia," Stolas said, a warning wrapped in weary affection. "I'm just being honest, Dad." She didn't back down, and Danny got the distinct sense this was a familiar dynamic. A girl who'd learned to speak truths her father danced around. She looked back at Danny one more time. "Good luck, Riftwalker." She left the way she came, and the gallery felt colder for it. Blitzo, who'd been standing at a respectful distance through the whole exchange with the specific stillness of a man trying very hard not to draw Stolas's attention to himself, for reasons Danny suspected went well beyond the current crisis, finally spoke. "So what's the verdict, Stolas? We keeping the kid, tossing him back, or feeding him to the Owl House politics grinder?" "None of those for the moment." Stolas rose, feathers settling with the fluid grace of something far older than his physical age suggested. "I am going to do the responsible thing, and not immediately weaponize an unclassified extra-dimensional anomaly, which, you're welcome, considering how many of my peers would do exactly that within the hour of hearing what I just heard." A pointed look at Danny. "You will need somewhere safer than Blitzo's office to exist, while we work out what tore, and how to mend it. I have wards. Heaven's scanners will have a harder time reading a signature buried under a few centuries of protective enchantment." "You want me to stay here?" Danny asked. "I want you alive and quiet, which this house is well suited to provide. Whether you stay is naturally your choice. I am not in the business of holding half-ghosts prisoner against their will, whatever certain overlords might do in my position. But I'd think carefully before wandering I.M.P City broadcasting a signature Heaven's already curious about." Danny looked between Stolas's calm, calculating patience and Blitzo's obvious discomfort at the suggestion, and felt, for the first time since the rift had swallowed him, the true scale of what he'd fallen into. This wasn't a town he could patrol and protect with familiar rules. This was an entire cosmology of factions, all of them older and better armed than him, all of them now aware he existed. "I need to get home," he said quietly. "My family doesn't know where I am. My town doesn't have anyone else to." "I understand," Stolas said, and for a moment the calculation in his golden eyes softened into something that looked almost like genuine sympathy, the expression of someone who'd also once wanted very badly to go somewhere he wasn't allowed to be. "And I intend to help you find your way back, Riftwalker. But it will take time, and information, and likely a favor or two from people I would rather not owe favors to. In the meantime," he gestured at the gallery, the estate, the wards Danny couldn't see but could almost feel, humming faintly at the edge of his ghost sense. "This is the safest cage in hell." I'd get comfortable. Outside, far above the estate's warded grounds, something moved through the gray sky that wasn't a bird. A distant, deliberate shape, circling once, twice, before angling away toward the horizon, like it had found what it came looking for, and simply hadn't decided, yet, what to do about it. The Exorcist came 3 nights later, and Danny felt it before he saw it. His ghost sense flaring so hard and sudden it doubled him over mid-sentence. Cold fogging out in a breath that fogged the air of Stolas's study like frost on a window. "That's new," Octavia said, looking up from the book she'd been half reading, half using as an excuse to keep checking on their house guest. She'd taken to seeking him out over the past few days, curious, sharp-tongued, the only person in the estate who talked to him like a person instead of a problem to be solved. "You just went the color of skim milk. Something's coming." Danny straightened, every nerve in his body, ghost half and human half both, screaming the same warning. "Something big, it feels like." He struggled for the comparison. "It feels like the opposite of what I felt when I got here. Like a wrongness, but a clean one. Structured." Octavia's face changed. She knew exactly what that meant before he finished describing it. Heaven. They found Stolas already at the tallest window of the estate, wings half mantled, expression gone flat and cold in a way Danny hadn't seen from him yet. All the warm, circling curiosity burned off, replaced by something that looked almost like dread held very carefully in check. "They found the signature faster than I hoped," Stolas said, not turning. "My wards are good, they are not infinite, and apparently a tear in reality broadcasts loud enough that even careful concealment only buys days, not weeks." Outside, Danny saw it, a single point of light descending through the gray hell sky far too fast, trailing something that looked like a held breath given shape. Silver, and terrible, and precise. It didn't move like anything organic, it moved like a decision that had already been made. "That's one exorcist," Blitzo said, appearing at Danny's elbow with an expression that had lost every trace of its usual performative confidence. "One. They send scouts before they send the choir. This is a look, not the main event, yet." "Then we don't let it get a good one," Stolas said, and for the first time Danny saw the ancient, dangerous thing underneath the charming exterior, power gathering at his fingertips, dark and immense, the kind of magic that had presumably kept a Goetia prince alive and in power for centuries. "Boy, this is the part where you decide something important." "What? Who you fight for?" Stolas's golden eyes cut to him, sharp. "That thing descending is not coming to negotiate. It is coming to assess whether an anomaly capable of tearing dimensional fabric constitutes a threat to heaven's metaphysical order. And if it decides yes, and it likely will, it will not be alone next time. You can hide, you can run. Or you can show it, right now, exactly what it's dealing with, and make it think twice about coming back with friends." Danny looked out at the descending light, at the estate around him full of people who 3 days ago had been strangers weighing whether he was a threat worth killing, and understood, with sudden, total clarity, that Stolas wasn't wrong about one thing. Hiding wasn't a strategy, it was just a slower kind of losing. "I didn't come here to start a war," Danny said. "No," Stolas agreed. "But wars have an unfortunate habit of starting themselves around things they don't understand. The question is only whether you get a say in how this one goes." Danny felt the rings form at his waist before he consciously decided to transform. White light splitting outward. Human give way to the familiar cold clarity of his other half. Hair bleaching white, eyes igniting green. Octavia's breath caught audibly behind him. Even Blitzo, who'd already heard the broad strokes, took an involuntary step back at seeing it happen in full. "Okay," Danny Phantom said, voice steadier than he felt, floating up off the balcony floor toward the descending light. "Let's see what heaven sends when it's curious." The Exorcist resolved into shape as it closed the distance. Vaguely humanoid, wrapped in something that looked like liquid silver poured into armor. Faceless in a way that should have been unsettling, and mostly just felt administrative, like something built for a task, rather than born with intent. It stopped 50 feet out, hovering, and Danny got the distinct impression of being scanned, cataloged, measured, filed. "Unclassified entity," it said, voice like a struck tuning fork, no inflection at all. "Dimensional signature, inconsistent with known infernal or celestial taxonomy. State your nature." "Half ghost," Danny called back, hovering steady, forcing his voice not to shake. "From a universe that isn't heaven or hell. I didn't mean to end up here. I'm not a threat to anybody's taxonomy." A pause. The Exorcist's blank silver face tilted. A gesture that managed to convey something between confusion and recalculation, despite having no features to convey it with. Unprecedented classification noted. Assessment pending further data. It drifted closer, exactly the distance Danny's instincts screamed was too close, and something extended from its arm. Not a weapon exactly, more like a probing tendril of the same liquid silver material, reaching toward him with clinical intent. Submit to examination. Every instinct Danny had built over 2 years of ghost fighting screamed no. He'd let exactly one entity examine him with intent before, back home, and it had ended with him strapped to a table in his own basement listening to his parents debate vivisection with academic enthusiasm before they knew who he was. He was not doing that again. Not here. Not for anyone. No, he said, and meant it with his whole chest. The tendril lunged. Danny didn't think. He moved. The way he'd moved 100 times against Skulker, against Technus, against every ghost that had ever mistaken him for prey, going intangible through the strike and reappearing behind the Exorcist's flank with an ecto-charged punch that connected with a crack of green light against silver armor. The Exorcist staggered in the air, more surprised than hurt, silver plating rippling like disturbed water where the blast had struck. Combat response logged, it intoned, almost conversationally, writing itself. Reassessing threat tier. It came at him fast, faster than anything that size should move, and Danny found himself in the kind of fight he hadn't had in longer than he wanted to admit. Not a monster with a grudge, not a ghost with a plan, but something built purely to fight and assess and adapt in real time, learning his patterns as fast as he could throw them. It clipped him twice, a glancing blow across the ribs that would have been a broken bone in a fully human body. A scrape of silver claws across his forearm that hissed with something that burned in a way ectoplasm didn't usually burn. Below, on the estate's balcony, Octavia had both hands fisted in the stone railing, and Blitzo had a hand halfway to a weapon he had to know wouldn't do a damn thing against something like that. And Stolas stood very still, watching with the calculating patience of someone deciding exactly how long to let this play out before intervening. Danny took the burn across his arm and used the half-second of adrenaline to go fully intangible, drop straight through the Exorcist guard, and come up underneath it with both hands glowing white-hot with a technique he hadn't used since Pariah Dark's rebellion. Not his full ghostly wail, not yet, but a controlled blast of concentrated ecto-energy that hit the Exorcist's core plating dead center and sent it careening backward across the sky in a spray of silver sparks. It caught itself 30 feet out, armor visibly cracked along one flank, and went still, hovering, its blank face somehow radiating something that felt almost like reassessment on a fundamental level. Threat tier. Significant, it announced. Parameters exceed standard anomaly classification. Recommendation escalate to choir review. That's it? Danny called out, chest heaving, arm still smoking faintly where the claw had caught him. You're just leaving? Assessment complete. Full engagement not authorized without choir sanction. The Exorcist rose, unhurried despite the visible damage, radiating none of the frustration or anger a normal combatant might after losing an exchange. Just cold, procedural withdrawal. Advisory. This encounter will be reported. Further contact should be anticipated. It ascended, and within seconds was a point of light again. Then nothing, swallowed by the gray hell sky like it had never been there at all, except for the cracked stone under Danny's feet, and the faint smell of ozone, and the 4 sets of eyes on the balcony below that had just watched him do something none of them had actually seen the true shape of until that moment. Danny dropped back down to the balcony, transformation holding a beat longer than usual with the exertion, and found Stola studying him with an expression that had shifted entirely. The careful, curious calculation of a man weighing an asset now overlaid with something that looked, disturbingly, like relief mixed with genuine concern. Well, Stola said quietly, that answers one question rather thoroughly. Which one? Whether you were worth protecting. Stolas's feathers settled, some of the tension bleeding out of his posture. I confess I did not expect an unarmored teenager to trade blows with an Exorcist scout and win the exchange. That was, he searched for the word and settled with clear reluctance on honesty, impressive, and deeply concerning. Because if a scout retreats calling for choir review, boy, what comes next will not be one polite silver messenger asking questions. Octavia had let go of the railing, knuckles white, staring at Danny with an expression that had shifted from curious houseguest watching to something more like genuine alarm. You just made Heaven's actual angel army interested in you specifically. Yeah, Danny said, human again, the adrenaline crash hitting him all at once, legs suddenly unsteady under him. Yeah, I think I did. Below the estate, in the streets of Imp City, word was already moving faster than any of them. An exorcist seen retreating, damaged, from Stolas's grounds. And in offices and towers and the deep places where overlords kept their counsel, a question was starting to circulate that hadn't existed 4 days ago. What exactly is Stolas hiding, and is it worth taking from him? Blitzo watched Danny sway on his feet, caught him under one arm before he fully buckled, and muttered, mostly to himself, "Kid, I gotta be honest. When Stolas said unclassified anomaly, I did not think it meant walking international incident. Sorry," Danny managed, voice thin. "Don't apologize." Blitzo's grip tightened, steadying. "Apologize after we figure out how to keep you alive through whatever's coming next." He slept for 6 hours in a guest room with wards etched into the doorframe and woke to raised voices 2 floors down that carried the specific pitch of an argument nobody was winning. Danny came downstairs still in yesterday's clothes, arm aching where the exorcist's claw had caught him. Stolas had done something to the wound overnight, some dark, careful magic that had closed the burn but left a faint silver scar that Danny suspected wasn't going away, a permanent souvenir of his first fight in hell. The voices got clearer as he descended, Stolas controlled but sharp-edged, a voice Danny didn't recognize, oily and confident in a way that set every one of his instincts on edge before he'd even seen the speaker. The gallery held 4 people who hadn't been there the night before. At the center, flanked by 2 much larger silent demons in expensive suits, stood someone who read immediately as Overlord, even before Danny had a name to put to the impression. Sharp gold jewelry, a tailored coat the color of old currency, and eyes that scanned the room like he was pricing everything in it, Danny included. "Ah," the stranger said, spotting Danny on the stairs, smile widening in a way that didn't reach anything behind his eyes. "There he is, the Riftwalker himself. You know, Stolas, I came here fully expecting you to lie to my face about not having him, and instead you've got him wandering around in pajamas." "Bold strategy, Mammon," Stolas said, and the single word carried a weight of long, weary history. "I did not invite you. You didn't have to. Word travels, old friend. An exorcist limping home from your estate with cracked plating tends to make the rounds." Mammon's gaze swung back to Danny, cataloging him the way a jeweler assesses a stone. And here I thought Stolas had finally found a mistress worth the scandal. Instead, he's been sitting on the single most valuable anomaly to fall into hell in a century. Tisk. Should have called me first, Stolas. We could have split the finder's fee. "He is not a commodity," Stolas said flat. "Everything's a commodity if you price it right." Mammon didn't move from where he stood, but the air around him felt suddenly heavier, a weight of unspoken leverage pressing at the edges of the room. "Here's my offer, Riftwalker, and I'll make it simple since I understand you're new around here. Come work for me. Voluntarily. I have resources Stolas doesn't. Information networks, dimensional specialists, a rather extensive collection of artifacts that might actually help you find your way home. All I'd ask in return is modest cooperation. The occasional demonstration, a controlled introduction to certain interested parties who'd pay handsomely for an audience with something as singular as you." "You want to rent me out?" Danny said flatly. "I want to invest in you," Mammon corrected, smile unwavering. "There's a difference, and it's a generous one. Stolas here can offer you a gilded cage and vague promises. I can offer you an actual path home, funded properly, with the full weight of my organization behind finding it. All I need is your cooperation, freely given." Danny felt the weight of the offer settle over the room, genuinely tempting, wrapped in exactly the kind of practical promise that appealed to the part of him that just wanted to go home to his family, his town, his life. And underneath it, unmistakably, the shape of a very comfortable trap. "What happens," Danny said slowly, "if I say no?" Mammon's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a flicker of calculation shifting gears. "Then I go home disappointed, and Stolas continues bearing the not inconsiderable risk of housing you alone against whatever heaven sends next. Because, and I say this with real affection, Stolas, you do not have the resources to protect this boy from a full extermination detachment if it comes to that." "I do. That's simply fact, not threat." "It's absolutely a threat," Octavia muttered from the doorway, arms crossed, having clearly slipped in partway through the exchange. It's an observation, Mammon said mildly, that happens to carry weight. Danny looked between Stolas's controlled anger and Mammon's practiced, patient leverage, and thought about Blitzo's warning from 4 days ago. Unknowns either get left alone, recruited, or turned into a very interesting science experiment. He was watching option 2 happen in real time, dressed up in gold jewelry and a reasonable-sounding offer. I need to think about it, Danny said. Of course. Mammon inclined his head, entirely unbothered, the picture of patience. Take your time. I'm a patient investor. Though I'd think faster rather than slower, given present company's rather limited defensive capacity. He turned to go, paused, glanced back with something almost fond. You fought an Exorcist scout to a standstill, boy. Do you understand what that makes you worth, to the right buyer? I'd hate for someone less courteous than myself to reach that same conclusion first. He left the way he'd come, his silent escort falling into step, and the gallery felt smaller once the door shut behind him. He's not wrong, Danny said quietly, once the demon's presence had fully receded. About the defense thing, one exorcist nearly took me apart, and it wasn't even trying that hard. If heaven sends more, Mammon deals in half-truths shaped like whole ones, Stolas said, some of the controlled fury still coiled in his voice. Yes, my resources are not infinite. No, that does not mean his offer is anything but a longer road to the same outcome. You, indebted, performing for an audience of overlords until you're no longer useful, at which point you become a liability instead of an asset, and liabilities in Mammon's ledgers have a way of disappearing. So, what's my actual choice here? Danny's voice came out sharper than he intended, exhaustion and fear bleeding through. Stay in a cage I can't leave, or sign up with a guy who wants to sell me to the highest bidder? Those are both terrible. There is a third option, Stolas said, after a moment, something careful entering his tone. You could stop waiting to be protected and start deciding, deliberately, what you're willing to fight for while you're here. Not out of desperation, the way you fought the scout. Out of choice. Danny looked at him. What does that mean, practically? It means I.M.P City has factions who'd value an ally who fights on principle rather than for coin, and factions who'd value one who fights on nothing at all. Stolas's gaze flicked, meaningfully, toward the window, toward the city beyond the estate's grounds. Blitzo's crew, for one, however unpolished, operates on something closer to loyalty than most enterprises in hell manage. Choosing to stand with people, rather than simply being protected by them, changes the calculation entirely, both for you and for everyone watching to see what you'll become. Octavia, still in the doorway, spoke up. He means, pick a side because it's yours, not because it's the safest cage available. That's the only move Mammon and every overlord like him can't actually price. Danny thought about I.M.P's cluttered office, Moxie's careful questions, Millie's blunt honesty, Luna's flat unimpressed read of him that had somehow been the most trusting thing anyone in hell had offered him. He thought about his own town, and the choice he'd made 100 times to protect people who'd never fully understand what he was, not because anyone made him, but because it was who he'd decided to be. I think I already know who I'd choose, he said quietly. I just didn't know it counted as a strategy down here. In hell, Stolas said, something almost gentle in it, genuine loyalty is rare enough that it functions as one. The choice found its test faster than Danny expected. 2 nights later, word reached the estate through Blitzo, relayed in a call that had him white-knuckled and terse in a way Danny hadn't seen from him before. That Mammon, patience apparently exhausted, had moved to acquire what he couldn't negotiate for, a strike team. Not Exorcist this time. Mammon's own enforcers, mercenary and well-armed, converging on I.M.P's office under the theory that Blitzo's crew, being the first to have contact with Danny, might know things worth extracting even if Danny himself was safely warded at the estate. They're not after me, Danny said, already moving toward the door, transformation rings forming before Stolas had finished relaying the details. They're after them, because of me. Danny, Stolas started, something like caution in his voice. I'm not staying in a cage while people get hurt because of a choice I haven't even gotten to make yet. Danny's eyes blazed green, the weight of the decision settling into something clean and certain for the first time since he'd fallen through the rift. You said pick a side because it's mine. This is mine. He was out the window and into the gray hell sky before anyone could argue further, I.M.P City's jagged skyline rushing up to meet him, I.M.P's flickering sign a beacon in the smoke-choked distance. And somewhere below, in an office that smelled like gun oil and old coffee, 4 demons who'd spent 4 days deciding whether to trust him were about to find out exactly what that trust was worth. The office windows were already shattered by the time Danny dropped out of the sky, glass glittering across the pavement like fallen ice. And the sound hit him before the sight did. Millie's voice, sharp and furious, cutting through gunfire and the wet crunch of something taking a hit it shouldn't have survived. He went intangible through the wall on instinct and came up inside chaos. Moxie down behind an overturned filing cabinet, one arm hanging wrong, still firing a crossbow one-handed with grim, focused precision. Millie, carving through Mammon's enforcers, with brutal, practiced economy, but outnumbered, blood, dark, sluggish demon blood, striping one side of her face. Luna had a mercenary pinned under her boot and another circling, ears flat, teeth bared in something that wasn't fear but was close enough to it that Danny's chest tightened seeing it. And Blitzo, at the center of it, fighting like a man who'd run out of clever exits and settled for pure stubborn refusal to go down, a nasty gash along one side of his jaw. There were 6 enforcers, big, armored, moving with the coordinated brutality of people paid well to not ask questions. Danny didn't think. He arrived. The first enforcer barely registered the cold before Danny's fist connected, ecto charge blooming green against black armor, sending the demon crashing backward through what remained of a desk. The second turned just in time to catch an intangible pass-through that left him disoriented for the half-second Danny needed to come up behind him and drop him with a controlled blast to the back of the knees. "About damn time!" Blitzo shouted, ducking a swing and driving his own elbow into an enforcer's throat. "You know, most heroes show up at the start of the fight. Not, I was in a warded estate 3 miles up. Give me a break." Danny caught a third enforcer's swing on a hastily formed ecto-shield, the impact still rattling up through his human half-bones. "Everyone okay?" "Moxie's arm's busted," Millie called back, driving her knife through an enforcer's shoulder joint with clinical brutality. "Luna's fine, 'cause Luna's always fine. And I will be significantly more fine once these assholes are on the ground." "Copy that." Danny turned intangible again, let 2 more strikes pass through empty air where his chest should have been, and came up with both hands blazing, not holding back this time. Not a controlled tap like he'd used on the Exorcist, but the raw, furious edge of watching people he'd only known 4 days bleed for a target that was actually him. 2 enforcers went down in a single sweeping blast, armor smoking, out cold rather than dead. Some habit of restraint even now, even furious, refusing to fully let go. The last enforcer, seeing 5 of his 6 teammates down in under 90 seconds, made the reasonable calculation that Mammon's paycheck wasn't worth this, and bolted for the shattered window. Danny let him go. Barely. The office looked like a hurricane had passed through it. Glass everywhere, the weapons cabinet on its side, Moxie's ledgers scattered and soaking in something that might have been blood, or might have been spilled coffee. Hard to tell in the low light. But everyone was standing. Everyone was breathing. That counted for something. In a place where Danny was starting to understand, it counted for almost everything. "You came," Luna said. Not quite a question, watching him with an expression that had shifted somewhere in the last 4 days from wary assessment to something Danny didn't have a name for yet, but recognized the shape of. "You're the first people down here who talk to me like a person instead of a problem," Danny said, chest still heaving, adrenaline burning through him. Figured that deserved something back. Moxie, arm splinted crudely by Millie in the aftermath, managed a pained but genuine smile. "For the record, extremely glad you made that particular calculation." Blitzo, wiping blood from his jaw with the back of one hand, studied Danny for a long moment, with an expression that had finally, fully settled somewhere past pending. "Watch closely. You know what this means, right, kid? Mammon's not gonna let this go quiet. We just handed his enforcers their asses in front of witnesses. That's not the kind of insult an overlord swallows gracefully. I know. And Heaven's still got a choir review pending on you specifically. I know that too. So what exactly is the plan here, genius?" Blitzo's tone was sharp but not unkind. The particular exasperated fondness of someone who'd apparently decided, somewhere in the last 90 seconds of watching Danny drop enforcers to protect his employees, that this was now his problem to worry about too. Danny looked around the wrecked office, at Moxie's careful, curious questions from 4 days ago, at Millie's blunt honesty, at Luna's flat, trusting read of him, at Blitzo's performative swagger that had never quite managed to hide the fact that he'd taken Danny in when he had no obligation to, and felt the shape of an actual answer settle into place for the first time since the rift had swallowed him. "The plan," Danny said, "is I stop hiding and start choosing. Openly. I'm not signing with Mammon. I'm not staying locked in Stolas's estate waiting for something else to come knocking. I pick who I fight for, and I make it loud enough that the calculation changes for everybody watching. You don't corner something that's already decided where it stands." Word moved fast after that. Faster than Danny expected. Faster maybe than it had moved about the rift itself. An unclassified anomaly with power enough to trade blows with an Exorcist and drop 6 of Mammon's enforcers without casualties had very publicly, very deliberately aligned itself with a scrappy independent outfit rather than an Overlord's empire or a Goetia prince's protection. It didn't fit anyone's model. That, Danny was starting to understand, was exactly the point. Stolas arrived within the hour, Octavia trailing behind him, unable to fully hide her relief at finding Danny upright and mostly unhurt, expression a complicated mixture of exasperation and something that looked, against all expectation, like respect. "You could have died," Stolas said, charging in without word to anyone. "I know. You could have made an enemy of Mammon permanently, rather than merely provisionally. Also true. And you did it anyway, for people you'd known 4 days, because it was the choice that felt like yours, rather than the one that felt safest." Stolas studied him for a long moment, then unexpectedly huffed something close to a laugh. "You are either the bravest anomaly to fall into my hell in centuries, or the most reckless. I confess I am no longer certain there's a meaningful difference." "Probably both," Octavia said, arms crossed. But there was warmth in it now that hadn't been there the first night. "Welcome to hell politics, Riftwalker. You just made your first real move. Mammon didn't come himself." He sent word instead, clipped, businesslike, devoid of his earlier oily charm, acknowledging the regrettable overreach of his enforcers and the closed matter of the Riftwalker's continued independence, which everyone in the room understood as exactly what it was: a retreat dressed up as diplomacy, an overlord recalculating the cost of pursuing something that had just demonstrated it wouldn't go quietly, and had, more importantly, chosen allies willing to bleed alongside it. The Exorcist sent nothing at all, not yet. But Danny understood, with the clear-eyed grimness of someone who'd learned to read a threat's patience, that nothing yet wasn't the same as never. Choir review took time. Heaven's machinery moved slow and certain, and somewhere above the gray hell sky, a decision was still being weighed about what to do with an anomaly that refused easy classification. That night, Danny sat on the office's cracked front step, glass mostly swept, Moxie's arm properly set by someone Stolas had sent over, the sign above them still flickering its tired red I.M.P. into the smoke, and let himself, finally, feel the exhaustion of 4 days that had reshaped everything he understood about death, power, and where he belonged. Blitzo dropped down beside him, 2 mismatched mugs of something that smelled aggressively of sulfur and cheap liquor in hand, offering one without comment. "For what it's worth," Blitzo said after a while, "when you first knocked on that door looking like a lost kid who'd wandered into the wrong dimension entirely, I had you filed under probably a problem." "Yeah, I got that read. Turns out you're a problem and an asset, which honestly in this line of work is about the best compliment I've got in me." Blitzo took a long drink, grimacing slightly. "You're not getting home tonight, kid. Might not be next week either. Mammon's simmering, Heaven's still deciding, and Stolas is going to keep leaning on us to keep you safe, because apparently that's a thing we do now. I noticed. So," Blitzo glanced sideways at him, "you in? For real, I mean. Not the desperate nobody else offered me a better deal kind of in. The actual kind." Danny looked out at I.M.P City's jagged skyline, neon bleeding into smoke, a world stranger and more dangerous than anything he'd faced back home, full of people who'd spent 4 days deciding whether he was worth trusting and had, mostly, cautiously, hard-won, landed on yes. "Yeah," he said, "I'm in." He didn't know, yet, how long it would take to find his way home, or what Heaven's choir would eventually decide, or how many more overlords would come calling, once word finished spreading through the ring. But he knew, sitting on a cracked step in the one hell that had somehow become, against every expectation, a place where people had chosen to bleed for him, before he'd given them much reason to, that whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. And in a realm built on the theory that everyone eventually looked out only for themselves, that was worth more than any gilded cage or golden offer hell had tried to buy him with. Somewhere above the smoke, the gray sky held its silence a while longer, but it was listening. And so, now, was Danny.